culture is obsessed with dominance. But what if that's not strength at all? Maybe it's time to challenge the alpha myth and make the case for something far more powerful. Letting go of ego, refusing the game, and building real influence through integrity, humility, and solidarity. Welcome to another bonus edition of the MTB Podcast, a segment of the weekly episode that I call Afterthoughts. This is my favorite part of these weekly presentations because it gives me a chance to dig a little deeper into something that came up during the main episode. So let me start with a question that's been bothering me for a while now. Why are we so obsessed with dominance? Scroll through social media for 5 minutes. You'll see it everywhere. The cars, the watches, the designer clothes. Not a mindset, but a grind set. The constant chest thumping about winning, crushing, dominating. The message is always the same. If you're not on top, you're nothing. If you're not feared, you must be weak. If you're not in total control, you're obviously a loser. And here's what's fascinating and quite a bit disturbing, actually. A lot of the same people pushing that message are also the ones claiming to follow a guy who, as the story goes, washed feet, stood with the marginalized, and willingly gave up power rather than cling to it. That's not a small contradiction. That's a complete reversal of the story. So, in this episode, I want to dig into that tension. Not to call out the loudest alpha voices, they're easy to spot. I'm more interested in everyone else. The people who are quietly absorbing the ridiculous alpha message. The ones wondering, is this what strength is supposed to look like? Because what if we've been sold the wrong definition entirely? What if real power doesn't come from climbing higher, but from choosing to step down? So let's dive into that in this episode of Afterthoughts. All right, let's start by taking a closer look at this alpha archetype. On the surface, that looks impressive. Confidence, control, decisiveness, the ability to command attention. But when you peel back the layers, shit just starts falling apart. Because the entire identity depends on constant reinforcement. The image has to be maintained. The status has to be on display. The dominance has to continue to be proven over and over and over again. There's no off switch. There's no rest. No real security underneath any of it. And that's the tell. Because if your identity requires constant validation from others, it's not strength. Think about it. It's dependence. You depend upon that validation. I think we should call it the insecure king syndrome. Look at Pontius Pilate in Matthew 27. This is a dude with real power. He's got Roman authority, military backing, political control of the land. And yet, when he's faced with a crowd and a quiet, uncooperative prisoner, he sort of panics. He folds. He tries to wash his hands of the whole thing while still giving the crowd what they want. That's not strength. That's a fearful little man in a toga. And that leads us to the truth most people don't want to say out loud. The alpha isn't a leader. The alpha is a hostage to his own ego. He's terrified that if he stops shouting or posturing, he'll vanish into the insignificance that he fears the most. That's the system we're being told to admire. Now let's flip the script, because Philippians 2, which we covered in this week's main episode, offers something completely different. And honestly, it's so different that most people don't know what to do with it. So the idea Paul was talking about in Philippians 2 is what's known as kenosis, self-emptying. It's not about weakness. It's about removing the hooks that the world uses to control you. I mean, think about it for a moment. If you don't need status, well, you can't be bribed with it. If you don't need external approval, you can't be manipulated by it. If you don't need to win, you can't be baited into losing yourself in exchange for a hollow victory. That's not weakness. That's freedom. It's like stepping off a game board that everyone else is still mindlessly playing. And this is where things get uncomfortable, especially in modern Christianity, because there's a growing trend to reshape this story into something more aggressive, more dominant, more aligned with power. The warrior Jesus, the strong man Savior. But that's not what the text says. The text says the highest honor was given to the one who went the lowest. Which leads to a line that might sting a little, but it needs to be said. If your faith requires a strong man to protect it, you aren't following the man who died on the cross. You're cheering for the guys who put him there. That's the tension between the lessons from these readings and the way they've been reinterpreted by not only Christian nationalists, but most evangelicals and all of the conservative Catholics out there. And if we're being honest with ourselves, that's something we can't afford to ignore. Now let's talk about why this matters for the rest of us. Because most people aren't trying to be alpha males. They're just trying to feel safe. They want to be respected and they want to feel secure. So the alpha myth sells them a very simple equation. Dominance equals safety. If you can just get enough control, enough status, enough leverage over everybody else, then you'll finally be okay. But here's the reality. That world is exhausting. Just look at the Trump regime and the chaos swirling around it. Everyone playing that game has bought into the alpha myth, the myth that dominance equals safety. But look at what's happening. It's competitive. It's isolating. And it is deeply insecure because there's always someone stronger or louder or more ruthless waiting to knock you down and take your place. It's not a ladder. It's a cage. And they're all trapped in it, fighting for what exactly? So what's the alternative? Well, our readings this week gave us the answer. Proximity. Instead of trying to rise above everyone else, you move toward them. You build relationships. You create networks of trust. You show up for each other in practical, tangible ways. And something interesting happens when you do that. You stop needing a strong man because the community itself becomes the support system. And that leads to one of the most important strategic shifts we can make. So many of us are looking at all the young men today following these alpha influencers, and we look at the alpha wannabe in the Oval Office, and we wonder how we're ever going to defeat them. But here's the strategic shift I think we need to make. We don't need to defeat the alpha. We need to make him irrelevant by building a world where his brand of cruelty has just absolutely no market value. That's how positive change in this moment can actually happen. Not through domination, but by making the alpha irrelevant. But let's get real about why that hasn't happened yet. Because to make the alpha irrelevant, we need solidarity. And if we're being honest, that's where the progressive movement usually hits a wall. We see the chaos of the alpha wannabes in the current regime and we think, we're better than that. But then we get into a room together and suddenly, if someone isn't 100% aligned with my specific priority, and if they don't use my exact vocabulary or share my exact hierarchy of grievances, I treat them like the enemy. We can't do that. We're out here trying to fight a forest fire, and we're stopping to argue about whose hose is the right shade of green. While we're busy auditioning for the role of the most principled person in the room, the alphas are winning. Why? Because they don't care about being right. They care about being in charge. They don't need to like each other to march in the same direction. If we want to defeat the alpha myth, we have got to grow the fuck up. We have to realize that purity is a luxury we can no longer afford. Look, solidarity isn't a feeling. It isn't even a friendship. Solidarity is a tactical discipline. It's the decision that I'm going to put my personal must-haves on the shelf for 5 freaking minutes so we can build a floor that doesn't collapse under all of us. It's about short-term compromise for long-term survival. Because here's the hard truth. The regime doesn't care if you were right while they were putting you in the cage. So, my challenge to the progressives in the room is this. Stop looking for a soulmate in your political allies. Look for a partner in the resistance. You don't have to agree on the destination of the entire journey to agree that the car is currently heading off a freaking cliff. The path forward isn't through a circular firing squad of ideological perfection. The path forward is through the quiet, flint-like resolve to stand with people you might not even like, because you realize your humanity is tied to theirs. We make the alpha irrelevant when we prove that we don't need to be identical to be unshakable. That's the real threat to the regime. Not our slogans, but our unity. So, what does this look like in real life? Yeah, how do we actually stop the infighting and start building that common floor? Well, it starts by adopting that mindset from Isaiah, setting your face like flint. But here's the twist. Resilience isn't about being loud, it's about being consistent. It's the quiet defiance of refusing to mirror the behavior that we're trying to defeat. We don't defeat an alpha by becoming a louder, progressive version of an alpha. We defeat him by staying grounded in a completely different set of values over and over again. Now, I'll be honest, this is harder than any protest march because it means taking the loss in the short term. It means letting someone else have the last word in a Facebook thread or a family dinner. It could mean choosing not to escalate a conflict just to prove you're more right than your ally. Let's be clear, we're talking about dealing with allies here. It might mean walking away from a win that would cost you the solidarity of the person standing next to you. This power doesn't look like a throne. It looks like mentoring someone who's been overlooked. It looks like giving anonymously so the focus stays on the need, not on your ego. It looks like stepping in quietly to support a colleague who's being pushed aside without needing a thank you or a headline. It's doing these things just to create more solidarity. We need to stop focusing on our personal political wins. These aren't flashy moves, but they are foundational. Because here's the bigger picture. Strong men are almost historical glitches. They rise fast, they burn bright, and they inevitably collapse under the weight of their own paranoia and instability. But communities built on the boring work of trust and empathy and shared responsibility, those are the things, historically, that endure. So I want to leave you with this distinction. The strong man builds a throne out of the people he steps on. The humanist builds a community out of the people he stands beside. History is very clear about which one eventually crumbles. So here is your challenge for the week. Identify one argument or one power struggle you're currently having with someone who should be your ally. This week, I want you to lose that argument on purpose. Empty yourself of the need to be right or to have the last word. Instead, find one concrete way to support that person's dignity instead of striving for their defeat. Stop building your own platform for a moment and help reinforce the floor we all have to stand on. Because the question isn't whether you have power. The question is what kind of power you're choosing to build. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Afterthoughts. If you want to keep up on everything I'm doing, please head over to thecodaproject.com and subscribe to my newsletter. You'll get notifications whenever I publish anything, and I'll keep you updated on the weekly live streams of Mythologizing the Bible. If you subscribe for free over at the Coda Project, you'll start receiving my publication called The Weekly Compass. This is a brief guide on a single core value. Think of it as a mini lesson plan for personal growth. It's perfect for families, students, and adults because I include discussion questions designed for each age group. As a subscriber, you'll also have access to the Guide to Kitchen Table Activism, which is a detailed resource designed to help you be politically active from your own home. The guide explains why activism is important, the philosophy behind kitchen table activism, and the foundational values it supports, before laying out how to use the tools you have to make your voice heard. It provides tools, tactics, and templates for you to use, and it only takes 15 minutes a week. If you care about our democracy, our country, and our world, then I encourage you to check it out. While you're at it, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you'll start receiving my newsletter called The Kitchen Table Activist. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, remember to question everything, keep what's good, and live what matters.